this shows what a political genius Napoleon was. He outfoxes the man who engineers the French Revolution and then kills the French Revolution.
Dr. Blaufarb, how did Napoleon change France?
That's the big question. Um, I think it really begins with his seizure of power in 1799 and the first couple years of his time as first consul following that seizure of power. The main thing Napoleon does, the most important thing he does, the thing on which everything else rests, including his ability to remain in power for the next 15 years, is he is able to end the French Revolution. He is able to end the disorders and conflicts of the French Revolution, while at the same time maintaining some of the revolution's principal gains, particularly the idea of equality before the law.
That's funny because he became an authoritarian leader.
But equality and authoritarianism go together very nicely. The thing that
they do
very much equality. This is Alexis de Tocqueville.
Yeah.
This was what he said this probably most persuasively of all. He said that equality actually is antithetical to liberty. There's a tension between equality and liberty. Liberty depends to an extent on inequality. But if you have a state in which everyone is absolutely equal before the law, that makes it much more easy for an authoritarian ruler in control of the government to impose his will on those people.
Wow, that's okay. That's like a whole podcast onto itself, Dr. Blaufarb. First of all, Alex de Tocqueville came to the U.S. and did a tour of our prison systems. I think, what was it, in the 1820s or something like that?
I think a little later, but yep,
a little later. So he was not
before the Civil War.
Yeah, he was post Napoleon. It's interesting that he says that. Let's go back. I'm purposefully not going to ask too many questions and follow up to that equality theme, because that could be a whole different conversation onto itself. You said seizure of power, 1799. So did Napoleon stage a coup?
Yes, Napoleon comes to power in a coup d'état. It's a planned seizure of power. He's not actually the guy who plans it. The person most responsible for planning this seizure of power is a fellow named Sieyès, a former priest, who had been a revolutionary in 1789. In fact, Sieyès is the man most responsible for the French Revolution of 1789. He is instrumental in creating the National Assembly and in giving that National Assembly the means of seizing power from the king and holding on to power. So in a way, this character, Sieyès, he engineers 1789, he engineers the revolution, and then 10 years later, disenchanted with what had happened, he engineers its overthrow. For him, for Sieyès and his plot, Napoleon is simply the general they need. They need a bit of armed force just in case the legislature resists the transfer of power that Sieyès is trying to engineer. And Napoleon is just the general they managed to recruit.
The right instrument.
It was actually their second or third choice. They had approached other generals, some of whom had refused. One of them had said yes, but was then killed in battle. And so Napoleon is not even their first choice.
Oh, wow. Talk about sort of fate. So was Sieyès disenchanted once more when Napoleon declared himself emperor?
Yes, well, the problem is Sieyès had a whole plan cooked up to essentially make himself, Sieyès, he essentially a kind of king. The title he gave himself was Grand Elector, of France, and he would live in the former royal palace, have 20 million pounds revenue every year, in all respects be exactly like the King of France, except that Napoleon outfoxes him. Once one he Napoleon, this shows what a political genius Napoleon was. He outfoxes the man who engineers the French Revolution and then kills the French Revolution. He outfoxes the guy, and
Wow.
Sieyès is completely he is completely surprised by this turn of events. But Napoleon very graciously, instead of having Sieyès imprisoned or killed, pensions him off to a chateau in the countryside with a very large sum of money.
Well,
Napoleon's
not too shabby.
he's not really vengeful. If you'll accept Napoleon as the dominant guy in the room, he's good with you. He's not going to be a vengeful. He's not vengeful, but he demands subordination.
Interesting. Let's continue our talk about how Napoleon changed France. And I'm interested in one of your books, which is titled The Great Demarcation, the French Revolution, and the Invention of Modern Property. Tell me about what you mean by that invention of modern property in that title, please.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, before the French Revolution, the category of property, what people in France considered to be property during the old regime, included things that we today would not consider to be property,
Like,
like public power, like a judgeship. So, for example, judgeships on the Supreme Courts of old regime France were hereditary property, passed down from father to son. They could be sold on the open marketplace. They literally had the status of property. There are other examples too. You've heard of the feudal system, of course.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
if you own a fief, if you own a seigneurie, that's the term they used. That included not just ownership of land, but it also included ownership of the right to judge in court the criminal and civil cases of the people living on that land. And
Oh,
like
wow.
just like the offices in the judicial offices, the fiefs and seigneuries could be bought, sold, just like property, inherited. And so, in other words, you could buy and sell public power. Public power was for sale. And it was
Was
considered
that unique
legitimate.
to France, or did
It is
did
particular. It is particularly pronounced in France, but it is not unique to France. Other countries, including the colonial United States or pre-United States, colonial America, had elements of this too. The historian Gordon Wood has written extensively about this. Um, the idea that to a certain extent, power and your public position were considered to be forms of property. This is a pre-modern, a kind of old regime European kind of norm. You can see it above all in kingship. Kings are seen as owners of their kingdoms. The sovereign is not just exercising a kind of abstract right of power over the people in his kingdom. He's actually owning the land in the kingdom as a property owner.
so the revenue of the state and the king's personal purse were one and the same in essence?
That's right. In fact, in countries like in England, England is this way for all of its moderate government and liberty. England to this very day, in England, the only person who is considered to be a full property owner in England right now is the monarch.
Wait,
Everybody
I
else,
didn't follow that sentence. Say that again. Full
if you,
property owner. What does
yeah,
that mean?
the only person in England today who owns outright, free and clear, owns outright, uh, is holds their property from nobody else, but owns it completely independently and fully, is the monarch.
How does that make
Everybody
sense?
else,
If I go to, we were just in London this summer. If I buy a house in London, I've bought it. Who else owns it?
Well, you can buy it under two kinds of contract. You can buy it in a contract called leasehold, in which you are buying ownership of the house for a period of years, up to
Oh,
999 years. Yes, many properties in England are leasehold properties, so that at the end of that term, that property returns to its lord, who in many cases is the monarch.
oh,
So that's
wow.
not full property. But then there's a more substantial kind of property right in England called freehold,
Yeah.
where there's no term of years. It looks like full ownership of the property, except legally you are holding it from the crown.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
free. It's called freehold because you're holding your property from the crown, but you are free of paying the crown any feudal obligations or services. But the basic fact is, in English law to this very day, the monarch is considered legally the lord and property holder of the entire land of England.
That is so interesting.
And
I'll have to
all European monarchies were like this a long time ago.
So okay, so how did he change property? We talked about this, public power. Uh, was it a decree? Was it, I mean, that's a substantial change within a system, right?
Yeah, it's a massive change. But the French revolutionaries commit themselves to abolishing this kind of hierarchical form of property in which you hold your property from a superior. Um, they commit to doing this in 1789, and what it's called, the kind of label that they give to that operation of turning this um, hierarchical dependent chain of property system into free and clear independent property that's beholden to no one. They call that the abolition of feudalism. That's what the abolition of feudalism is.
I see.
Feudalism is essentially a model of property owning, and
Of course.
that involves these hierarchical chains of holding, dependence, domination. And the French revolutionaries decide to abolish all that, and they
Yeah,
do it. It's a very complicated system. It takes a long time. It's still not completely done, even by the time Napoleon is packed off to St. Helena. But it, it the process is finally completed in the mid 19th
it
century.
also gets rid of corruption in a big way.
Well, I mean, I don't.
Introduces efficiencies and also, I guess, some sort of meritocracy. If you're
Yeah, that was one of the arguments for it, for trying to create free and clear, independently owned property. It was to give property owners an incentive to improve their lands.
I see.
Um, it also had a political motivation, which is um, to allow citizens to be independent. The idea being that if you own your property free and clear and are not dependent on a superior lord, you can express your political will without any kind of constraint. You can express yourself freely. But if you are holding your property from a powerful lord and are dependent on that lord and have to pay that lord feudal dues and have to sit in the lord's court and be judged, are you really going to have a free vote? Or are
That's
you going to be
fascinating.
under the influence of that proprietary superior?
That is interesting. You're right. We'll be back after a short break to talk about Napoleonic Wars. We'll be right back.